Greetings, Grandsire Archon, Sire Archons, my fellow Archons, and friends. My name is Archon James Thompson, and I'm a member of Delta Sigma Boule located in the south suburbs of Chicago. I'd like to share with you a story about a truly amazing man. This man was born in Jacksonville, Florida on June 17, 1871. He attended a school by the name of Edward Stanton, a black segregated school that was noted for its scholarship and its massive size. Turns out the reason why it was such a large school is because it was the only one in the city that blacks were allowed to attend. Now, this amazing young man graduated from this school at the age of 16, but was not able to further his education in Florida because at that time blacks were not allowed to go past a primary level of schooling. At the age of 16, he was forced to travel to Georgia in order to attend Clark Atlanta University. But he would still have to get some high school credits from there. Now, fast forward the summer after his freshman year at the university, instead of going home to party and hang out with friends, he went into the back hills of Georgia to teach former slaves how to read and write. And he did this with his own resources. Now, a few years later in 1894, he graduated from Clark and decided to go back home and take on a job teaching at the school from which he graduated. Now, the Stanton School realized early on that this was a truly amazing man, and within a handful of years promoted him to principal. But while teaching, he hooked up with his brother, John Rosamond, an accomplished composer, and together they wrote one of the most impacting songs of the century, Lift Every Voice and Sing. This amazing man wrote the lyrics as a poem, and his brother put the words to music. Now, this song was first sung in 1900 by 500 black school children at Stanton. It was part of a celebration for Abraham Lincoln's birthday. It's been reported that Booker T. Washington, another truly amazing man, may have attended this event. Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven rings with the harmonies of liberty. Well, we all know the first verse, don't we? Well, still, while teaching at Stanton, this amazing man decided to take up the study of law, and subsequently took and passed the Florida State Bar, the first African American to achieve this. Now, a short time later, he went out for a meeting with a young black female journalist. They met on a park bench located in Jacksonville. You probably know where I'm going with this. Shortly after their meeting began, they were surrounded by a large group of local white male militia who had mistaken her for being white, and this amazing man came this close to being lynched, if not for their commanding officer, who decided at the time that some further investigation was warranted. Now, actually, they probably just took a closer look at this lady. Now, despite being released, this amazing man was devastated by this experience. He went home, packed his bags, grabbed his brother, and they ended up joining the Great Migration to the North. Mind you, he was not fleeing the South out of fear. No, he left the South in defiance. You see, he had a plan. Now, it's still the year 1900 when they arrived to New York, and they have very limited means. But these are two very talented brothers. They start cranking out songs. In fact, in a short period of time, they had written over 200 songs for Broadway and amassed more than $15,000. Now, that doesn't seem like much, but that's over $350,000 in today's currency. Now, this amazing man was just getting started. He looked around and found a group of black Republicans. They belonged to the Colored Republicans Club, and he joined them. And within a matter of months, he led this club in a fervent campaign to re-elect Teddy Roosevelt, who in fact in 1904 was re-elected. and realized that this was such an amazing man that he appointed him as consul to Venezuela and Nicaragua. Now this amazing man would spend the next 7 to 8 years of his life in Central and South America, but not alone. You see, about halfway through, in 1910, he married a young black woman by the name of Grace Snell, a woman that was described at the time as cultured and well-educated. Well, still while away, this amazing man found the time to write one of his first books, an autobiography of an ex-colored man. But he wrote the book anonymously. He was concerned that it might jeopardize his position as diplomat. It was a radical book for its time, but it would be 15 more years before he would reveal that he was the author. Well, moving along, in 1914, he and his wife moved back to New York, and he took on a job as editorial editor of a bi-weekly newspaper called the New York Age. Now, this newspaper was aligned in goals and concepts with Booker T. Washington, an obvious hero of this amazing man. But the following year, to be exact, November 14th, 1915, at the age of 59, Booker T. Washington died. He died from complications related to kidney disease, and this almost crushed the spirit of this amazing man. But he turned his attention to a local chapter of the NAACP, and he joined it. Now, I found it quite interesting that he would go from the philosophy and opinions of Booker T to that of the NAACP, which at that time was reflected by W.E.B. But that, my friends, would make for yet another story. So the NAACP realized that this was a truly amazing man, and in 1917 appointed him as their field secretary. So for the next few years, he traveled about the South and Midwest, establishing new chapters, even in states like Kentucky and Georgia and Tennessee. In a short period of time, he had greatly expanded the membership of this organization to the point where in 1920 they were compelled, realizing that he was much more amazing than they first thought, to appoint him as their first black executive secretary. Yes, the NAACP was an integrated organization. Now, you would think that being effectively the chief operating officer of such a prestigious organization would give you very little time to do anything else. But this amazing man churned out literary work after literary work. He published an anthem on Negro poetry, and he'd written some of the poems. He published 2 anthems on Negro spirituals. He published The Black Manhattan. He published one of his most celebrated works, God's Trombones. Eventually, he would be considered one of the fathers of the Harlem Renaissance. But at this point in time, he was the leader of the NAACP, by default a staunch civil rights activist, often writing out and speaking out about racism and segregation and discrimination and Jim Crow and lynchings. In fact, he was a chief organizer, one of the chief organizers of the largest black parade in the history of the U.S. to that date. On July 28, 1917, in New York, there was the silent protest parade. Imagine 10,000 blacks, women all dressed in white, men in black, children at their side, marching the main streets of New York in silence, but in protest. Protesting the lynchings that had been occurring throughout the South. You know, there was something else that sparked off the enthusiasm for this parade, something that happened a few months before the event in my home state. Yes, in the late spring of 1917, an aluminum company located in East St. Louis, Illinois, decided to lay off more than 200 of their white workers and replace them with blacks who had migrated up from the South, presumably with lower wages. Now, the surrounding white community was incensed. They were outraged. They took to the streets in mob action, And every black they would come upon, they would pummel. They went onto streetcars and pulled some blacks off and beat them unmercifully. They even went into some of the black communities and burned down scores of homes. In some cases, camping out in front of these homes, waiting for men, women, or children to come running out in terror, attempting to flee the flames, and they would shoot them. They would shoot them. 2 years later, in 1919, this amazing man coined the term Red Summer. This is when similar atrocities, race riots, were occurring across the nation in major cities as a result of angry white World War I veterans returning home and having to compete with blacks for jobs and housing. Second verse. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the day that hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to a place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. Well, it's 1930, and this amazing man has been at the helm of the NAACP for 10 years, and he's ready to move on. But he would move on to a faculty position at Fisk University. He joined their School of Writing and Literature. They created a special endowment chair for him. A few years later, he would become the first black professor admitted to the faculty of New York University. At this point in time, this amazing man thought he was nowhere near his finish line. He had plenty more he wanted to do in life. He was only in his 60s. But one day while vacationing in Wiscasset, Maine, he decided to go out for a ride with his Arcusa. Oh, did I fail to mention that this amazing man was not just an icon, but also an Archon? They decided to go out for a ride, and as their car turned across an unguarded railroad track, it was T-boned by an oncoming train, and this amazing Archon would not survive his injuries. Yes, on this day, June 26, 1938, at the age of 67, Archon Johnson would die. But his Arcusa survived her injuries. In fact, she went on to live almost another 30 years, spending lots of her time advancing his legacy, a civil rights activist in her own right. Final verse. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, Thou who hast by Thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met Thee, lest our hearts drunk with the wine of the world, we forget Thee. Shadowed beneath Thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land. This amazing man was truly amazing, but not just because of this song. Yes, an iconic, magnificent, wonderful song. A song that 20 years after it was first sung would be considered the Negro national anthem, but also because he was an educator. Yes, he was a teacher, because he was an administrator of education, a principal, because he became a professional educator, a professor. These are the additional reasons this man was so amazing. But furthermore, he was a lawyer, a diplomat, an author, a journalist, a poet. He was 2 times over a leader of the NAACP, a civil rights activist. Gosh, he was a main voice of the Harlem Renaissance, right up there with Claude McKay and Langston Hughes. He was also a member of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity. And last but absolutely not least, he was an Archon. Yes, Sigma Pi Phi all the way, one of us. Grandsire Archon, Sire Archons, my fellow Archons, and friends, I thank you for this opportunity to present to you, believe me, a truncated version of a bio of a truly amazing man. I've had the honor and privilege of presenting to you one of our own, Archon James Weldon Johnson. Thank you.